Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built this Next.js 14 website that uses artificial intelligence to detect people, records a 30-second clip, and saves it for review later. I'm going to show you how I built it from scratch and deployed it to the cloud. The link of the actual website has been shared below. You don't need any prior knowledge of either Next.js or TensorFlow or any of the packages that I'm going to use today. All you need is Node.js installed and a text editor like VS Code. So here is a quick demo of what we are going to build today. This is a AI-enabled human detection app. So whenever the auto record is enabled, as you can see by the glowing button, whenever it detects a person like this, it is going to start recording a 30-second clip. It is going to also notify the user with a ping sound that it has detected a person in the webcam feed and it has started recording a 30-second clip. And when that is done, it is automatically going to save it into the downloads folder so that the user can review the video clip later. And as long as the auto record is enabled, that means AI is actively monitoring the webcam feed. And whenever a person is detected in the webcam feed, this is automatically going to start recording a 30-second clip and is also going to give the ping sound to notify the user that it has detected a person. The website also comes with certain other features, like you can disable the auto record function. You can manually record a video. You can click a picture. You can change the orientation from mirror to normal, and you can also change the theme. It will also allow the user to change the notification volume and review the pictures and videos for later because they will be stored in the downloads folder. So I'm going to start by creating a new folder on my desktop. I'm going to name the project as Watchtower AI, and I'm going to drag and drop it on the VS Code icon. Now, if I hit Command K and then Z, I enter Zen mode, which I prefer, and then Command B to open the sidebar and Command J to bring up the terminal window. I think this is going to be Control B and Control J respectively in case of Windows. So here in the terminal window, I'm going to write npx create next app @latest and /. The / is going to make sure that this creates the Next.js project within this specified directory, and it is also not going to ask for any names for the project. So it is going to ask for some configurations. I'm going to use TypeScript because JavaScript in itself, being a interpreted language, is prone to runtime errors. So I'm going to use a type scripting language that is built on JavaScript. So I'm going to use TypeScript. I'm going to hit yes, ESLint yes, Tailwind yes, source I'm not going to use, and AppRouter yes, import alias I said no, because I don't want to change the alias name right here. So it is going to take some time to initialize the project in this directory. After this is done, I'm going to use a shadcn This is one of the more popular UI libraries at this moment for Next.js projects. The biggest feature of shadcn I guess, is that it allows you to copy over the components into your project directory. So when we'll be installing specific components like button or sonar, those specific files will be copied over onto our project, and if we wish, we can customize them in any way we want because we'll have the access to the underlying code. From here, I'm going to go to the app and page.tsx file and get rid of everything here. I'm going to use the ES7 plus snippet tsrafce, which is going to create a component. I'm going to write home page as the name, and in the div section, I'm going to write hello world just to see if the page is working or not. And if you are not able to use this tsrafce snippet, then I would suggest that you install a specific extension. For that, I'm going to hit Shift Command X to open up the extensions panel, and here you can search ES7 plus. This is a very popular extension which comes with a lot of useful snippets, so you might want to install this. So I'm going to go back by hitting Shift Command E, that is going to bring up the Explorer, and I'm going to I'm going to close all these windows, and I'm just going to bring up the terminal window here and then run this app by saying npm run dev. It is running on localhost 3001. I think while testing I opened some other service in 3000 port, so it is coming in 3001. I can command click or control click on it, and then it is going to bring up in the default web browser. So here I can see hello world is printed. This background is because of a specific gradient that the default boilerplate code comes with, but when we'll be initializing shadcn this automatically gets taken care of. On top of this, after shadcn is initialized on this project, we'll be also building a feature where the user will be able to select light mode or dark mode. So let's do that. I'm going to stop the service by hitting Ctrl C and then clear the terminal by hitting Command K and then initialize shadcn by writing npx shadcn-ui at the latest init init. So it is going to ask for similar configurations. I'm going to say yes on the TypeScript, default on the style, slate on the base color. Global CSS file is exactly there within the app directory, global.css. I'm going to hit enter. CSS variables, yes, we want to use them. And we are not using any specific custom Tailwind names like TW hyphen. We are just using the default. So I'm just going to leave it blank and hit enter. And Tailwind config.js is exactly there in the root of the project. So I'm going to hit enter. Components are just going to use the defaults here. Import alias for the util second, I'm going to use default. React server, yes. And proceed, yes. So now that shadcnUI is initialized, I am going to install a few components now. So I'm going to write npx shadcn-ui at the latest, and I'm going to add a button. I'm also going to add a sonar component. This sonar component is a very new component that Shadcn introduced. It is going to allow us to create toasts at the bottom of the screen. This is one of the things that I felt missing from shadcnUI, but now that they have brought it, it's really good. So I'm going to hit enter, and what will happen is it is going to create this components folder, and under that it's going to create a folder called UI, and it is going to copy over the files, the code for the button and sonar. So you can see we have this button, specific variants of the button, the sizes like default, small, large icon. These are already there, and you have the option of creating your own variant, for example. So you can see, say, my variant, and you can customize it saying that, okay, I want secondary to be so you don't get the thing is that you don't get the auto completion here, because if you were to write it within a page tsx file as a class name, you would get the text primary, text secondary, all those options auto completed, but you don't get it because this is TypeScript now sees this as a object. But the point is that you get to customize this code to build additional functionality as you wish, because the code gets copied over onto the project directory. So I'm going to undo here whatever I did, because I'm not looking forward to changing anything here. So now I'm going to start working on my page. So at the top, I'm going to use two references. One is for the webcam, another is for the canvas. So how it works is that we put a canvas on top of the webcam, and whenever an object is detected, we make sure that the box that we'll be drawing on the canvas is actually right on top of the object that is being shown on the webcam feed. To show that, we need references to the specific components, that being the webcam and the canvas element. We do that in Next.js using useRef. So we're going to write const webcam ref. We're going to say useRef, and this is going to be coming from React, and this is going to be of type webcam. Now the webcam type is actually not defined here, because we'll have to install a specific package for this, and we are going to use React webcam component. So if we go there, it gives us the documentation of how to use it. It's very simple. So first of all, we'll have to install it using this command. So after that is installed, we can actually click on this webcam component and then hit Command K, and it gives us the option that we can import it from React webcam. So that is what we're going to do, and this is imported. And now we'll have to place it on our page, and we can easily do it by just writing, let me put it inside a div, and then writing just webcam. Can be a self-closing tag. So if we go to our page and hit refresh, well, we'll have to run it by writing npm run dev, then we'll hit refresh. Well, this comes because we are using useRef, but we are not using the use client. So we'll have to put this at the top of the page. Some hooks like useRef, useState, those are only available on the client side. Also, we'll be using webcam, so it has to be a use client. So as you can see, we see our webcam feed. I think I already allowed this for this specific localhost 3001 port, but you might get a pop-up here that allow webcam or not, and then if you click on yes, you'll be able to see your webcam feed. So now let's put this webcam and the canvas in a nicely laid out web page. So for that, we'll be writing some layout code using TailwindCSS and HTML elements. Let's do that. So I'm going to delete this div here and start writing div with class name flex hscreen, and inside that I'm going to write div with class name relative. We specify this component's position as relative because later we'll be placing the canvas component absolutely, so that it gets placed on top of the webcam feed. For that reason, it's important that the container of that absolute element has a relative positioning. I'm going to create another div inside it with class name relative again, hscreen, with full, and inside that we'll be placing the webcam. Again, a self-closing tag. Let me type it again. And to make sure that this webcam becomes available in our code, so we'll have to hook it up with this webcam ref. So we're going to write ref webcam ref, and we're going to set the mirrored state. So if you're using, let's say for example in your FaceTime, it's very likely that you usually see your feed in a mirrored state. So we want to allow the user to change that. So for that, I'm going to create a state variable on the top. I'm going to create a specific section for the state variables because there will be many. The first state variable is going to be mirrored and it's going to be of type boolean. So I'm going to first make it false, and we'll have to import useState from React. For the mirrored state, I'm going to pass in the mirrored value, and that will make sure that whenever the user changes using button, the mirrored state, the webcam will also reflect that specific choice of the user. I'm going to give the webcam few other class names. So I'm going to write class name, height to be full of the container, width to be full of the container, and object contain, so that the webcam feed does not get cropped on the sides or the bottom and the top. And also I'm going to give it a slight padding of 2. And then under that, we are going to place the canvas component. In this canvas component, we are going to show the detected objects as red or green. To make it available in the code, I'm going to use the ref, and I'm going to create a ref, canvas ref, which we haven't created yet. Similar to webcam ref, we'll be creating a canvas ref. And this webcam ref and canvas ref will be used in the code to do all sorts of visual modifications so that we can show the detected object as red and green. So this canvas ref is going to be of type HTML canvas element, and we're going to give it a few other class names. We're going to place it absolutely as we said earlier, and the top will be 0 and the left will be 0, and height will be full of the container, width will be full of the container, and object contain. Now if we go back to our page, we'll not be able to see much difference, but the canvas is actually placed on top of this video feed. So now let's keep building at the right side of the page. So I'll write a comment here. This was the left division for webcam and canvas. This is just a comment for myself. And here we are going to write right division, a container for the button panels and wiki section. Here we're going to write div with a class name flex row, and flex1. So the flex and flex row is going to make sure we are placing the button panel first, and right to that we are going to place the wiki content, and flex1 is going to make sure that it is only takes the available space. So right after the webcam and the canvas element is placed, actually right after the webcam is placed, because canvas is placed absolutely, so it does not actually take any space within the page, it just gets placed on the webcam. So after the webcam is placed, whatever space is available, that will be made available for the right division, which will have the button panel and the wiki section. So inside that, I'm going to create another div with class name. I'm going to give this button panel a border, and this is going to be border primary, but I'm going to make sure that is very subtle. So I'm going to give it a 5 opacity, and then border 2 pixel thickness for the border, and then max width for the button panel is going to be extra small. It's going to be a very thin button panel, and it's going to be flex column, because there will be 3 sections in the button panel: the top section, the middle section, and the bottom section, and those are going to be placed vertically. So that is why we're saying flex and flex column. And then we're saying gap 2, although it will not be useful because we're going to use justify between. That is going to help us place these containers as top, middle, and bottom, while whatever space are there within those 3 containers will be evenly distributed. So in the unlikely case where there is not much height in the page, the gap is going to be at least 2. But in most cases, the space is going to be very wide, and it is going to be evenly distributed from the between the top and the middle component and the bottom and the middle button panel. I'm going to move on and write shadow MD. So I'm going to give it a medium shadow, and I'm going to make it rounded medium. So the corners of the button panel are going to be rounded, and it's going to have a padding of 4. So within that button panel, as I said, there will be 3 sections: top section, middle section, and bottom section. I'm going to create 3 divs for this, and each div is going to have a class name flex column, because within those button panels we want to place the buttons vertically, and within the buttons there will be a gap of 2 between the buttons, and this is going to be our 3 containers. And we are going to put a separator button container, and this separator I just realized that I haven't installed it. So this is a shadcn component. So I'm going to stop the service here by hitting Control C and then Command K to clear the terminal, and then write npx shadcnui @latest add separator, and it is going to pull over that code and put it in the separator file. And then we can click here and then hit command dot and import it from the components UI separator. So it is going to import from this file, and in the backend it uses radix UI, but we don't want to import it from here. We want to import from the components UI dot separator where it just placed it. And we are going to make sure that before the middle section and after the middle section and before the bottom section we are placing the separators. In fact, we'll have to place these two separators inside this div. So here we'll be writing the buttons for the middle section, and here we'll be writing the buttons for the top section. So the first button for the top section is going to be the theme toggle that is going to allow the user to change the theme from dark mode to light mode. So for that I'm going to use shadcn. So if I go to shadcnUI under components, actually dark mode and Next.js, so we'll have to first install Next themes. So I'm going to copy this code for npm. If you have yarn, you can also use yarn. I'm going to use npm. I'm going to write this code here and then hit enter. We're going to install Next theme. Then we'll have to create a file theme provider.tsx under the components folder. So I can just copy this line and then come to the root of our project, and then if I create a new file with that slash in between, what VS Code is going to make sure is that it is going to put it in the components folder which is already created, and within the components folder it is going to create this file. So if I just hit enter, we'll see that it is getting created as a file within the components directory. So within that I'm going to copy this code and paste it here. Next we'll have to make sure that this theme provided that we just pasted here, that gets imported in our layout file. So our layout file is here, layout.tsx, and we'll have to wrap whatever is inside the body using that theme provider component that we just created. So we're going to do that. First we'll import this theme provider component in our layout file. Then we'll have to wrap it using this code, and children just gets wrapped within it. That way theme will be applied in all of our pages. And then to toggle the theme, we'll have to create another component. This component is actually called mode toggle. So for that we'll have to create another file. We can name the file anything we want. I'll create the component within the components directory itself. I don't want to place it within the UI because this is used by shadcnUI. You can place it, but I just like to keep it within the components itself and not within the UI folder. So I'm just going to create a new file here. You can call it anything. I'm just going to call it theme toggle.tsx and then paste that code here, and we'll be able to import this mode toggle from anywhere in our page, and we'll be able to add the functionality of toggling the theme of the web page. Now this does have, as you can see, drop down menus and other like button as dependencies. So we'll have to import those. So we'll have to install drop down menu. It's a shadcnUI component. So I'm going to write npx shadcnUI @latest add drop down menu. Then it will be added within the components UI drop down menu folder, and that gets resolved. This sun icon and moon icon, it is trying to look for in the radix UI module, but we haven't installed it. When we installed shadcnUI, it actually installed Lucid React icons. So we're going to import them from Lucid React icons itself, and we don't want to install another library just for this. I'm going to delete this line, and if I scroll down and come and click on it and command dot, that will allow us to add import from Lucid React. That already has that sun icon, and I'm going to do the same for the moon icon. And as you can see, that gets imported from Lucid React. This Lucid React got installed when we installed shadcnUI itself. Now we'll be able to import this mode toggle from anywhere in the page, and we'll be able to change the theme of our project. So let's do that. Let's go to page.tsx, and as the first button, I'm going to add mode toggle, and we're going to import it from here. And if we run our app, you see we have the button, and if we click on it, we can change the theme to follow either the system or dark or light. Next, we're going to create a button here that is going to allow the user to change the horizontal orientation of the video, that is whether it is set to mirrored or not. So let's do that. We'll have to import button from the component where shadcnUI placed it, and we'll set the variant of the button as we have few options here. We can set as default destructive, which will be a red button. Ghost will not have anything, either outline or anything. Link will have underline, I guess, and secondary will use a secondary color. Outline is what we're going to use. It is going to have a very subtle presence just with the outline. and the size we are going to use as a small icon, and inside that button we are going to use an icon that is flip horizontal, and that is coming from Lucid React, which got installed from ShadcnUI. So if we save it and go back to our page, we can see that we have that button here. Now to add interactivity to it, we are going to write on click, and in the on click we are going to write a arrow function, and here we are going to set the mirrored state. Actually we are going to toggle the mirrored state. The way we do it is we are going to write set mirrored, so it usually takes a value true or false, but it also has another overload where it takes arrow function which it executes, and the return value of that is actually set for the state variable. So it in the arrow function it passes the previous value or the previous state of the state variable, and what we're going to do is that we are just going to toggle that previous state, and that is going to be returned, and that is going to be set for the state variable. If we run this page, yeah, we'll be able to see that our video is changing in its horizontal orientation. Now I'm going to add some spacing within the button and the separator. So we can do that using by writing a class name and writing margin y to be 2. That way we'll have some more space. Now we'll be building this middle section. In the middle section there will be 3 buttons. One is for the camera, another is for the recording, and another is to set or unset the auto recording feature. Let's create a button with variant outline size icon and on click. So in the on click we are going to write a function name on, or rather user prompt screenshot, and I'm going to declare this function within the component itself. I'm not going to declare it outside the component. So I'm going to create a section handler functions, and I'm going to write function user prompt screenshot, and here I'm going to write take picture and save it to downloads. And for the button icon I'm going to use a camera. That is again a Lucid React icon. If you save it, you can see the camera is there. We haven't added the interactivity here, which we'll be adding at a later point. Now we'll be creating the video recorder. It will be quite similar. So I'm going to copy this camera button, and for the icon I'm going to use video from Lucid React, and for the function I'm going to say user prompt record, and I'm going to show if the video is recording, I'm going to show it as a red button, and if it is not recording I'm going to show the usual outlined button. For that I'm going to first create a state variable which is called is recording, and initialize it as false. I'm going to type it as boolean and use that state variable. I'm going to say is recording. If it is recording, then use the destructive variant, otherwise use the outline variant. And then I'm going to write the on click function as we defined for the user prompt screenshot, and for this we are going to say check if recording, then stop recording and save to downloads. If not recording, then just start recording. So we'll be building these functions at a later stage. Let's continue building the button panel, and as before I'm going to add more spacing to this separator. So I'm going to do the same thing as we did before, class name margin y2, and in fact let me do that for all the separators. I'm going to delete these separators and replace them by this. Yeah, that way we have more spacing. As we said that within the middle section there will be 3 buttons. We already built for the camera and the video recording, so we'll be creating another one for the auto record enabled or disabled status. For that we are going to write button, and the variant is going to be outline for now, size is icon. On click I'm going to say toggle auto record. Let me define this function here. There's a function toggle auto record. So here also we are going to check the state of the auto record, and if the auto record is enabled, the button is going to look different, and if it is disabled, it is going to show a different icon. So for that I'm going to create another variable. So I'm going to say state snippet and auto record enabled. Initially it is going to be false, the state is going to be boolean, and in the button we're going to say if auto record is enabled, then we are going to show the destructive because it's going to be red, and when it is disabled it is going to show just the outline. And when the auto record is enabled, since it is a important feature on this website, I'm going to create animation that shows that even when the user is not actively monitoring the webcam, the AI is actually actively monitoring the webcam. To show that activity, I'm going to use an animation. I'm going to write curly braces, then if auto record is enabled, then I'm going to just write show animation for now, because we'll have to install a specific package for this. And if it is not, then I'm going to show a specific icon of person standing, which is a Lucid React icon. So let's try to toggle this auto record in this toggle auto record function. So for this, I'm going to write if auto record is enabled, then set auto record enabled to false. The reason we don't adopt the previous approach of writing previous then toggling the previous is because we also want to show a toast here, show toast to user to notify the change. And if the auto record is not enabled, then we're going to set auto record enables to true, and again show toast. Right. So we're going to use the ShadcnUI latest component update, that is the sonar component. We're going to use that to show a toast to the user whenever this auto record enabled or disabled status is changed. So I'm going to close this service now, command K to clear the terminal, and then write npx shadcn-ui latest add sonar. Well, I think I already installed sonar, so I just don't need it. So if we go to shadcnUI sonar component, we already have installed it using shadcnUI latest add sonar. So in the layout file, we'll have to place it right under the content of our page. We're just going to import it first in the layout.tsx file, and then place it right under the contents of the page. I'm going to make sure that it is within the theme provider so that the theme gets applied, whether it's dark theme or light theme, onto the toaster also. And then while using, we can import it from sonar as a toast, and toast as a function we can call with the message that we want to show on the page. So in the page.tsx, I'm going to import toaster, and when we are setting or unsetting the auto record enable state, we're going to write toast auto record, the message auto record enabled, and for the disabled, I'm going to say auto record is, I'm sorry, this is actually disabled and this is enabled. So I'm going to run the app using npm run dev. So we can see auto record enabled and disabled. Since we added the animation text, so that is why it is showing like this, but we're going to change that. So for adding that animation, we are going to use a different component called React Loader Spinner. So if we go to the getting started or the documentations, so I can see that all the animations that are available. Here is the infinite spin and line wave and oval. They also give a nice code snippet that you can use. I'm going to use the rings for this, and install this, I'm going to use their code. So they have mentioned this npid react npmi. So I'm going to copy this code to install it in my project. And for the auto record enable button where we wrote show animation, I'm going to bring in that component which is called links, and it's coming from React Loader Spinners. I will set the color as white because we are already setting the destructive background, which is red, and height I'm going to set as 45. I'm going to run the app again, and when we enable the auto record, we can see the animation is running. It gives the impression that even you are not actively monitoring the screen, AI is actually live and it is monitoring this. You can disable it, the person standing icon is. So finally, for the bottom section, we'll be creating the volume slider. So for that, we are going to use the Popover component of shadcnUI. So we'll go to the documentation components, and we want to use the Popover component. When the user will be clicking on the button for the volume, we want to show a popover, and you can place anything here, but we'll be showing a slider that will allow the user to change the volume level. To install Popover, we can just copy this code for npm. I'm closing the service here and then writing that command. It's going to install the Popover component under the UI, under the components directory. They give a good small snippet of how to use this Popover component. As you can see, you have to have the dapper, which is Popover, and then there will be a trigger, which in our case will be a button, and which will have a volume icon from LucidReact, and then there will be Popover content. The Popover content will be the slider for our case. So we'll also have to install the slider. So I'll go to the slider, and here I'm going to copy this code. And then it also shows us how to use this slider. So I'm going to start with Popover. So first here I'm going to write in the bottom section of the buttons panel. I'm going to start by writing Popover from components, not from Radix UI. In there will be Popover trigger. Make sure that I'm importing the right one from components, and within that there will be a button. The variant of the button is going to be outline, and size is going to be icon, and the icon is going to be volume 2 from LucidReact. And after the Popover trigger, we'll have to write Popover content from components, and within that we'll be adding the slider from components, and it can be a self-closing tag. And the max value we're going to write as 1 because it's going to be a volume slider, and we're going to set the volume from 0 to 1. because later when we will create the audio utility and we'll be instantiating a audio object that actually expects a decimal number to be passed onto it as a volume level. So that is why we want to set the max value as 1, and I'm going to set the min value as 0 so that the user can mute it completely. I'm going to give it a step of 0.2. You can also give 0.1. So to store the value of the volume slider, we will have to create a state variable. So for that, I'm going to write state snippet and hit tab. I'm going to write volume, and I'm going to give it an initial value of 0.8. And in the volume slider, I'm going to write the default value as the volume. Actually, it takes a number array. As you can see, it takes a numbers array, and this is a number, so it is not going to match. So I'm going to put it inside a array. And when the user leaves the slider, there will be a on value commit function called, and here we will be setting the state variable that we just created. So this callback function is going to be called using a value parameter, which will have the value that the user has just set, and we're going to use that to set the volume state variable for us. And this value also comes as an array, so we are interested in the first element of that, so we're going to set it right there. And then finally, when the user has set the volume, we want to give the user an indication at which level the value has been set, and we are going to play a beep sound that is going to indicate to the user that this is the level at which the volume has been set. So for that, I'm going to write a simple function called beep here with the value that we just set. Now this beep function is going to be used across the page to give the notification sound to the user. So we are going to create it in a separate utility file. So let's do that. I'm going to create in the root of our project a new folder called utils, and inside utils I'm going to create a new file called sound, or rather audio.ts. So inside this the function that we just want to use, which is called beep, I'm going to define that, and it is going to take a volume which is going to be a number, and here we're going to instantiate a new audio element. And the way we can do this is either by passing a URL into this, or it can be a URI or a content URI, which will have a base64 encoded audio file. So I have seen that if you use URL, sometimes depending upon the internet connection, after you click on this button or after the recording has started, the ding sound usually comes with some amount of delay, and that is not always the expected user experience. So I prefer to use a base64 encoded audio URI in this case. You can go to this website, base64 audio encoder. So base64 guru, if you have an audio file which has a small beep or small notification sound, you can upload that file here, and it will give you a base64 encoded value. And the value is going to look like something like this. You will have to append this specific string which says data semicolon audio mpeg base64 comma, and then the base64 string you are going to add. That way, when we will be passing it to the audio component that we created, that we will know that this is the encoding that follows, and it will be able to play that sound. So I already have uploaded a ding sound here, and I have already got base64 encoded string, and that is what I'm going to paste it here. So if you want to use this specific sound, you'll be able to find it in the GitHub. So I'm going to paste it here. So your string is going to look similar, something like this, and this is going to be about 1 MB or 700 KB size in my case, and this has the encoded base64 audio. So I'm going to write in the audio data colon audio slash, I know that I uploaded a WAV file, that is why I'm going to write audio slash WAV semicolon base64 comma, without space. I'm going to append that specific string, that is audio base64, and then I'm going to set the volume of the sound with the passed in parameter, and then finally I'm going to play the sound. Now if we go to the page.tsx, we can import this from our utilities where we defined it, and that should give us the beep sound whenever the user changes the slider. So I'll run this app. Well, I get this hydration error for this specific reason, that this popover trigger is actually being abused. So if you read through this documentation and everything, you will know that whenever you abuse a specific element in your Next.js application, you get this hydration error because this popover trigger should not have a button component within it unless or until you specify this as child. So if you do that, then if you hit refresh, that error does not come, and you'll be able to change it, and you can see the volume is increasing. Now let's go ahead and create the wiki section. So right after the button panels, we're going to write a container for the wiki section, and for the class name, I'm going to give it height to be full, flex 1, that is going to make sure that it's going to take up only space that is available to it, padding of y to be 4, padding of x to be 2, overflow y to be scrolling, because we want, if depending upon how much content we have, we want to show a scroll bar. And within that, I'm going to create an inner component, render feature highlights section. I could write it as a function, but I'm going to use the component notation here, although we'll be defining it as a function only, as you'll see. So I'll copy the name, and within this component itself, I'm going to create a new section called inner components and write function, that name, and here we can return any JSX, and it will have quite some content for the page. So I'm going to paste some content here, and this is the JSX it is going to return. So if we go back to the page, you can see that our wiki section is visible. If we make it dark, this is also visible. As you can see, we use some colors. So for the colors, we have actually used red and green. So we have created a span and wrapped that specific text, which is red, with that specific color to give it that red color. And similarly for the green, it just shows that for other objects than a person, we're going to show it in green, and for persons, we are going to show it in red. This we will be modifying later to add more interactivity. So when we'll be clicking this button and it is going to show it as a live button, we'll be adding a button here as well, so that the user knows that this is the button we're talking about, which enables or disables the auto recording. Similarly, we are going to do it for the video recorder. That button is also going to be here, and that the state that is showing here is also going to be replicated here as well. So that is the reason why we defined this component as an inner component, so that we are able to use those state variables when we will be adding those buttons in the wiki section itself. Now that our layout is almost done, we'll go ahead and create the main feature of our website, that is the person detection. And we are going to use TensorflowJS, and more specifically the cocossd module, using which we'll be able to detect any object. And I have found that that specific model is very useful in terms of detecting actual persons, and that is what we are going to utilize in our project. So to build the object detection, we are going to use TensorflowJS. So if you search TensorflowJS and then see models, we'll go to object detection. So as you can see, it is going to use the cocossd module. It gives us some examples of how to use it. There are certain dependencies we'll have to install. Most importantly, we'll have to install this cocossd TensorFlow models, which will actually be used to call the load method upon to get the model loaded, and then on that model we'll be running the detection. And they're taking the example of image. When we'll be pulling this onto our project, we'll be able to see that this detect model actually detect function actually takes a lot more than just an image. It also takes any HTML component that can stream videos, or the HTML component that can be representation of an image. So we'll start by installing TensorFlow models cocossd. So I'll stop this service here. I'll write npm I TensorFlow models. I stands for install. So that is done. If we just require this in our project or import this in our project, this is going to throw an error that WebGL is not found in the backend and CPU is not found in the backend. I could show you that, but rather just go ahead and install this too. npm I this, and with a space, I'm also going to mention the other one, as it says that it requires in the backend as dependencies. So I'm going to import a cocossd, not in this specific way. I'm just going to use the import notation for this. I'm going to write import star as cocossd from TensorFlow models cocossd. I'm also going to import TensorFlow backend CPU and import TensorFlow backend WebGL. Now we'll be able to use this cocossd to load our model, and we want to load this model, or rather we want to start loading this model when our page first loads. We do that using use effect hook in Next.js. So I write use effect snippet. So it takes some dependencies, and based on which it runs certain functions. So first we'll import it from React, and this is the array, which is the array of dependencies. If we keep it empty, that means this whatever is inside this use effect hook is going to run only once when the page loads. So this is where we want to start loading our model. So I'm just going to create a function called init model, which will be called, and I'm going to define the function here, loads model, and we're going to set it in a state variable, set it in a state variable. So for that, I'm going to create a state variable here called model, set model. Let's just keep it as undefined, and let's define the init model function first, where we'll be able to see the return type of the load function, which we'll be using load the model into our project. So it is going to be an async function called init model, and first we're going to take the loaded model by calling cocossd.load, and if we comment click on it, we can see that it returns a promise which resolves to become an object detection. That is how we know that this is going to return an object detection model, and we're going to import it by clicking on it and then command dot add import from TensorFlow models cocossd. So it is going to import right after this this import statements that we wrote, and we're going to set this loaded model. Actually, we'll have to await this because it does not, as we said, that this returns a promise and then that gets resolved into object detection object. So that is why we await it, and that's why we add it as an async function, and then we set this loaded model in our state variable. So now this is giving me the error because obviously we did not type it properly. So TypeScript wants us to type it as object detection, and that way we'll be able to set it in our state variable. Now, if we go back to the documentation, we can see that we can actually pass a model config while loading the model, and that model config, in that model config, we can actually define a lot of options, and among them one is the name of the model. So that goes into the parameter called base, and you get options like mobile v1, mobile net v2, light v2, and light mobile net v2. Light mobile net v2 is the smallest in size, although mobile net v2 has the highest classification accuracy, and that is what we are going to use, mobile net v2. So in the load function, we're going to pass in an object, and if we hit control and space, then we get the autocomplete. We are going to use the base, and we do get IntelliSense here by hitting control and space. We see those models that were available to us, and we're going to use mobile net v2. Documentation also mentions that in case you want to fetch another model, you can use model URL, but we are not going to use that in this specific tutorial. We're going to use the mobile net v2, and when that model gets loaded, we are going to set it in the state variable. We also want to show a loading page when the model is loading in the backend. So for that, we are going to set a loading state. We're going to write state snippet, hit tab, and then name it as loading. Initially, the loading is going to be false, and right before we start initializing our model, we're going to set the loading state as true, and this is going to be called in an asynchronous way. And when the model is loaded, we can create another use effect hook, but this time we're not going to keep this dependency array as empty. Rather, we're going to put model inside it, so that whenever the model state changes, whatever is inside that will be called. So we'll be creating another use effect hook with model as dependency, and the function is going to check if model is loaded, then set loading to false. So let's quickly build the loading page. It's going to be very simple. We're again going back to the JSX section of our page. So right after this closing div, within this closing div, we're going to write, we're going to check first if it's loading, and if it is loading, then we're going to show a div, and this div is going to be the loading page. We're going to write, give it a class name, z is equal to 50, so this shows above everything else. Width, so this is going to be absolutely positioned, and width is going to be full, height is going to be full. Flex, because we want to place items within it, so we want to show a text and a small animation. So the items is going to be center, and to justify, I'll write a center, and I'm going to give it a background of primary, and here I'm going to show rather getting things ready, and I'm going to use the same component that we used earlier from React Loader Spinner with a height of 50, color of red. So to check the loading screen, I will set it as true, and I'll run this app by writing npm run dev. Actually, background primary is too dark. I should have used background primary foreground. That way we'll be able to see the loading screen, and we're going to change it back to loading so that it only shows when it is loading. So our loading screen is done. Now our model has loaded. So if we inspect this and go to the network tab and then hit refresh, you can see our loading screen is there, and then the model is actually being fetched. And when the model loads, so as you can see, 174 MB resources have been fetched, and when the model has loaded, we cannot see our loading screen anymore. So our model has been loaded. So now the next step is to use that model and set it within an interval, and in that interval it will periodically run periodically check using the webcam feed if there exists any object or specifically any person or not. So let's do that. So if we go to the documentation, so we are done with this load method where we have loaded our model. Now we want to call the detect function on the model and get the prediction. So for that, what we're going to do is set up an interval, and we're going to set up that interval within a use effect hook. We do that because we want to check if certain components have finished loading or not. So it will have a list of dependencies, and the dependencies, one of the dependencies is going to be webcam ref, and if the current state exists on that webcam ref or not. That is going to make sure that the webcam has completely loaded, and we're also going to check if the model has loaded or not. And if it has, then we're going to write the function for the use effect. So within that, we're going to set up an interval, and we're going to save that in a local variable. We don't want a state variable here because this is not going to be used in any type of UI. We are not going to show it in the UI, so we can simply use a plain old variable called interval is equal to null. And then when we are setting the interval, we're going to make sure that we are storing that interval within this interval variable, so that if in case in the future we'll have to cancel, we should have to cancel this interval, we can use this variable to cancel it. And as you'll see, in certain cases we will indeed have to cancel this interval and reset this interval. So that is why we are storing it inside this globally defined variable. So we're going to write set interval. So it takes a function that it runs periodically, and then it finally takes interval. So I'm going to set 1 second interval for now, and this is going to be called every 1 second. And then here we're going to call the function called run prediction, which we haven't defined yet. Before I define that function, I think you can tell there is a flaw in this logic, because this model state and the webcam ref state is going to change multiple times. So when the model is loading, in the loading state, when the model has loaded, when the webcam ref webcam is probably loading, or the user permission has been granted, those states are going to change, and then this is going to create multiple intervals. So to make sure that there is only one interval running at one point, we're going to have to write a clearing statement within this use effect hook. So we're going to write that by writing return and another function, which is going to be clear interval, and we're going to use that interval that we stored earlier. So it says that it has any, so TypeScript is complaining, so I'm just going to have to type it as any, and that is going to make sure that every time the state changes, the previous interval gets cleared and a new interval is set that is going to run the prediction. So at one point there is going to be only one thread that is going to run the prediction. So I'm going to define this function now, function run prediction, and within this I'm going to check if, I'm going to check multiple things here. First, if the model has loaded. So when I write model, that is going to make sure that the model is not in undefined or null state. I'm going to check if webcam ref and current state exists. So the webcam reference is not in undefined or null state. In fact, webcam video exists, similar for the video, and the ready state is going to be 4. So if we hover over it, there is MDN reference for the HTML media element. So we are using a webcam native React webcam library for this, but internally it uses HTML media element. So if we command click or control click on this, is going to open in our browser. Here we can see that the ready state 0 means it does not have any data, but 4 means it has enough data. So we want to check if the state is 4, then we are confident enough and go ahead to run the prediction. And this triple equal sign in JavaScript means that the value matches exactly and not the reference. So the value actually matches with the 4. So that is why we use 3 equal signs. So with that, we're going to write const predictions is equal to model dot detect function, and here we're going to pass in the webcam ref dot current dot video. Now there are a few things. One, if we command click or hover over this, we can see that it accepts multiple things as the image parameter. It can be a tensor 3D object, it can be an image data, it can be an HTML image element, canvas element, or a video element. So our webcam ref current and video also has the same HTML video element type. So that is why this detect model, which is very versatile, accepts the video object as well, and it runs predictions on it, and it is an async function, so we'll have to await it. That means we'll also have to make our function an async function, and that will give us the predictions. Now I'm just going to go ahead and write console log predictions and run this app. I'm going to close the existing app, clear the terminal, and run npm run dev, I'm going to refresh this, and we can see that our every second we get predictions, and it is detecting me as a person with certain score. So that score does get changed as I'm moving around, but every second we are getting person detection. So I'm going to delete this console log, and the next steps are to show this person as a detected object, and we are going to show that by drawing onto the canvas a box around the person. You remember that we placed the canvas on top of underlying webcam feed, but to make sure that the height and width of the canvas is actually same of the webcam, we'll be writing a function called resize canvas before we start drawing onto the canvas. So I'm going to write a function called resize canvas, and we're going to pass the canvas ref and the webcam ref. We're going to define it as a standalone function without any dependencies, just the parameters that are being passed. I'm going to hit command dot and add missing function. So I'm taking the help of the refactoring so that the types are already declared in the function definition. So if we click on it and then hit command D, it is going to take us to the place where it is defined. And as you can see, it has been defined outside the component, and that is quite okay with me, because this is going to be a standalone function which is going to just set the size of the canvas ref according to the webcam ref. So here I'm going to start writing const the canvas. First I'm going to take the canvas out of the canvas ref, so that will be just the current on the canvas ref, and similarly the video, for the video is going to be webcam ref dot current dot video. The question mark gets automatically added by the TypeScript because of the null check. And then if canvas and video exists, then we are going to get the video width by taking it from the video. We're also going to take the video height. So what we can do is that we can destructure this video like this, and we can get the video height as well. As we know that we have two properties, video width and video height, we can destructure the video in this way to get those video width and video height. So we're going to set the canvas width and height accordingly with the video width and canvas height as video height, and that will be our resize canvas, and it is going to make sure that whenever we're drawing, we're actually drawing on top of the webcam ref, and the canvas height and width matches exactly with the webcam feed. Now I'm going to go back to where we are calling it. Below that we're going to write draw on canvas, and we will have to pass the mirrored state here, because depending upon horizontal orientation of the video, our drawing logic will change. And we'll also pass in on the predictions that we received here, which will have the name of the object and the score, and it will also have, as we saw here, the x and y values and the width and height. This comes as an array, and if we see the documentation, this gives us that it comes as x, y, width and height, and it is called bbox, and the name of the object comes with the key of class. We have passed on the predictions array, and we'll also be passing the canvas ref dot current, and we'll be passing it as a context, so we'll have to call it and we'll also use canvas and canvas ref dot current, and we'll be getting the 2D context out of it, and that context will be passing onto the draw on canvas. And I'm going to create it as a separate utils function because there is going to be some code and that is not specifically related to this page. So I'm going to go to the utils and create a new file, draw.ts, and I'm going to export the function that we are calling there. It's called draw on function, draw on canvas, and we're going to import it. I think I misspelled it, and we're going to import it from where we are about to define it. So these are the parameters effects. So we're going to copy that and just paste it here and comment it out. So first is mirrored, which is a boolean, then predictions. So it is going to be an array. The array is going to be of a type detected objects, because if we comment click on this detect function, which we called here, we'll see that it resolves, it returns a promise that resolves into a detected object array. That is what we are getting in the prediction. So that is the type of predictions. I can write it here like this, and I'll have to import the declaration, the definition of it. So I get it. Predictions is a detected object array, and we're passing that as the second parameter. So I'm going to write detected objects here, and I'm going to have to again import that. In fact, let me import it just from here. I don't need object detection. In fact, I was declaring it in the wrong place. I just realized that. I'll have to write it here. And as a third parameter, we are passing the context, the 2D context. So I'm going to write ctx. So we can get the type from the getContext function. If we hover over it, we can see that the type is canvas rendering context 2D or null. So actually this is 2D null and undefined. So if we mention the full thing here, that resolves the issue here and resolves the issue here. So now we are ready to draw the predictions onto the canvas. So I'm going to write predictions dot for each, and this is going to be calling this function where each is going to be a directed object of type directed object, and we're going to draw each of those directed objects on the canvas. So first, if we check the directed objects, we know that there are 3 parameters. So we're going to destructure it by writing const pbox, and we also have score, and we're getting it from directed object. It also has a class, but it will not allow me to use this class because we can't use class as a name of a variable. So we can say this is a name of the object, right? So just to shorten it, I'm just going to say the name. Obviously it has an object, it has a key called class, but we are going to say that the variable name is going to be name and not class, because class is a reserved keyword. And the b box is going to have x, y, and width and height. So we are going to destructure that as well. Directed object comes as an object, but b box comes as an array. If we see the documentation, each detected object comes as an object, but b box comes as an array of numbers. We have to use the array notation, and in this specific case the order matters. So first we get the x, and then y, then the width, and then the height. Now we're going to check if the context that was passed is valid, is not undefined or null. So here we're going to write ctx.beginPath. So it's going to create a new line, and we are going to use some styling here, and then we're going to finally draw using either stroke or fill. So for the styling, we're going to use ctx.font, and I'm going to use 12 pixel and Courier new. This is one of the web safe fonts, and ctx.fillStyle. We're going to check if the name which we destructured here is exactly equal to a person. Then we are going to use a red color, and I am going to use ff0f0f, that specific tone of the red. And then if it is not a person, then for any other object, I'm going to use a specific hue of blue. That is, I'm going to give it an opacity, because I'm not going to use a stroke. When you use a stroke, then you draw around the object. I want to give it a fill. So when you'll be drawing a rectangle, for example, it is going to fill the rectangle, and obviously in that case we'll want opacity to be set. So I'm going to set ctx.globalalpha as 0.4, and then we're going to write ctx.rounded rectangle, and here it takes x, y, and width and height, and it takes a value that defines the radius of the rounded corners. And once we have set those, it does not actually draw anything on the page. We'll actually have to write ctx.fill. That way it creates a filled rectangle. Then we are going to do the text styling. Actually, we have already done the text styling there, so I'm just going to pull it down. And after this this rectangle has been drawn, we are going to set the global alpha back to 1 so that the text can be more legible, is equal to 1. And then we are going to draw the text. So ctx, I'm going to say fill text. So since we are using the fill, so this is going to be drawing the text on the page. So as a text field, I'm going to pass on the name, and then x, and then y. I'm going to save it, and if we go back to our page and refresh it, we can see that it is drawing every 1 second. So let me increase the frequency of the redirection. I'll go to the page.tsx file, and here we are setting as 1 second. Let's make it 100 millisecond and refresh it. That way we'll be able to see that it is working correctly. And now if we use the mirror, we can see it is not actually matching. It is actually going in the opposite direction. Here we're going to check if it is mirrored. Then we already saw that if it is not mirrored, then it is working fine. But if it is mirrored, then we'll have to modify our logic. So we're going to write rounded rectangle. So as you can see, if we are moving in the left in this direction, it is going in the opposite direction. So it is as if the x and y is being calculated from the right side of the page, while when it is not mirrored, it is usually calculated on the left side of the page. So for that, we'll have to make sure that the x value is actually the canvas width minus the x value, right? So earlier when we are calculating from the left side of the screen, this x value is actually equivalent to the canvas width minus the x value that we actually received. So that is what we're going to write, ctx.canvas.width minus x. Y is going to be same, and the width, as we are calculating from the right side, so if this is x, this is going to be the width on the opposite direction. So we are going to say minus width, and the height is going to be the same, and the rounded rectangle, the radius is going to be 8. So that way, if we refresh it, when it's not mirrored, it's working fine. When it's mirrored, it is not working. So as you can see, it is working when it is not mirrored, but when it's mirrored, it's still not working, although we define the function properly. But let's do one thing. Let's make sure that it comes with a mirror state of true, and we're going to refresh the page. So when it's loading, it's going to come with the mirror state on, and this time it seems to be working. Although as you can see, the text is not working because we did not implement it for the text, but the box is working. The reason why this happens is that when we are changing the state using this button, the prediction function which is running in the backend has no clue of this change, of the state change, because when we set up this run prediction function in this interval, it was created in a separate thread, and when we are changing this mirrored state in the UI thread, this thread has no clue that the state has changed, and in that interval thread it is going to try to draw the canvas, and it is going to use the same state that it used to have before, because it does not know the mirror state has changed. So what we have to do in that case is that we have to add the mirrored state change as a dependency, so that whenever the mirrored state is changed, it clears the existing interval and it resets the interval. That way, whenever we change the mirror state with click of a button, it clears the earlier thread and creates a new thread which knows that the state has changed, and the mirror state is going to be in turn passed with the correct updated value onto the drawn canvas. So now if we save this and refresh it, we'll see that for the box it works. If we change the orientation, it also works for the box. Although in the mirror state, the text does not work because we did not implement it. So let's do that. So before the fill text, we're going to check if it is mirrored. For not mirrored, this is going to work, but for mirrored, we're going to do the same thing, ctx.fillText. So here it is going to be name, and then for the positioning, we're going to use the same thing, which is basically for x, we're going to replace this by the width of the canvas minus x, and for the y is going to remain the same. We save it and refresh the page. It is going to work for the state, for the mirror state as well. Now just to add some final touches to it, I think as you can see, when it is not mirror state, it is showing on the left side, and in this case it is showing on the right side. I think I'm going to make both of them on left side. So for fill text, when we replaced x with the width of the canvas minus x, so that is actually calculating from the right side, and it is just placing at that corner, but we want to push it the width of the box, so we are going to again add minus width, so that way it's going to push it further towards the left, and if we refresh it, it's going to be on the left corner. So now it's very much not quite visible, so I'm going to give it a different color. So I'm going to say ctx.fillStyle, because we are going to use fill, so we can set the fill style as black, and for position we're going to give it a slight padding. On the x side we're going to add 10, and on the y we're going to dip it by 20 pixel. And similarly, since we are measuring from the right side, in case of mirrored, we'll say okay, we pushed too far, so probably I'll add 10 here. That is going to work as a 10 pixel from the left, and then for the height it is going to be the same as 20 pixels from the top. So I'm going to hit refresh here, and then we can see that it's coming as black text with some padding, and then on the other side as well. Now the next step would be to add recording. First we are going to write manual recording by click of this button, and then we'll hook it up with the detection logic so that we can start recording whenever a person is detected. So to record the media from the webcam, we are going to use Media Recorder API. So if you go to Media Recorder API documentation, so this is part of Web API that allows us to record media streams. So here first we are going to instantiate a Media Recorder instance, and that takes a stream object, and for our case that stream object is going to be the webcam refs video, and then we are going to set up the event handlers when data is available. So we'll be setting up this on data available handler, so which will receive a blob object which will contain the recorded stream, and using that blob we'll be able to save it onto our downloads folder. And finally we'll also define the on start and on stop handler to show it onto the page whenever the media recorder is recording a stream. So with that goal, we are going to start by defining a ref that will have the reference of the media recorder. So we're going to write const media recorder ref is equal to use ref, and the type is going to be media recorder or null, as we'll be initializing it with a null value. Right under that, we are going to initialize the media recorder, and we're going to initialize inside a use effect hook, and we do it inside a use effect hook because we want to check whenever the webcam state changes. We want to make sure that the webcam is actually available before trying to get the stream from the webcam, and that stream will be passed on to the media stream constructor. So that is why we want to check if the webcam is available. So I'm going to write use effect snippet, and the dependency of it is going to be webcam ref. So whenever webcam ref changes, this is going to run. First off, we are going to check if the webcam is in the correct state. So we're going to say if webcam is not undefined or null. So if webcam exists and webcam ref.current also exists, then we are going to go ahead and get the stream. We're going to say webcam ref.current.video and .capture stream. So this capture stream method does not come up on the video element, although the video element is of type HTML video element. I did some digging and I found out that this is because TypeScript does not have it updated. So what we can do is that we can say that video as any object, and then we'll be able to call capture stream on it. Now we're going to say if stream was successfully captured, then we can go ahead and create a new instance. We're going to set this media recorder instance in the media recorder ref.current is equal to new media recorder, and we're going to pass on the stream here. Now we're going to implement the on data available handler on this media recorder instance. So we're going to say media recorder ref.current.on data available, and this is going to be a function which will receive an event object, and on this event object there will be a data which will contain the blob, and using that blob we'll download the video onto our downloads folder. First we're going to check if e.data.size is greater than 0. Then we're going to say const recorded blob. We're going to create a new blob object, and we're going to pass on the e.data object into this, and this actually takes an array, so we'll have to put it inside an array, and as a second parameter we can specify the type of this as video. Now we're going to write const the video URL, so we can get it from the url.create object URL, and we can pass on the recorded blob. Now from this URL we're going to create a tag, so we're going to write const a is equal to document.create element, and we want a tag, and we're going to set the href of that a tag as video URL that we created. And this a tag now has a download attribute. If we set that attribute, then it means whenever we click on this a tag, it is going to automatically download the content. But you can specify a file name in that download attribute. That means that whenever the download starts, it is going to make sure that the file name is actually same as the file name that you specified. So we're going to say a.download, and for the file name we're going to use the timestamp at that specific time. For that I'm going to use another function, so I'm going to write $format date, the function that I'll create, and I'm going to pass on the new date, so that is going to give us the current date at this point. And finally the extension I'm going to use is webm. So this function is a standalone function I'm going to create right at the bottom of the component. Since it's going to be a standalone function, I'm going to write function format date is going to take a d, which is a date object, and we're going to return formatted date. So I'm going to write const formatted date. So I did some digging around and I found there is a very clean way of formatting date to get a timestamp. So I'm going to paste that code here. So here first from the d that was passed, we are getting the month, and then since it starts from 0, so we are adding 1, and then we are getting the string value, and then every string value has a pad start method. So we are specifying the maximum length to be 2, and if padding is required we are going to add 0 at the front, and then we are doing the same thing for the date and the year. Using that we are creating an array of those 3 objects, that is a padded month, padded date, and the year, and that array is going to be joined by a hyphen, and then we are adding a space, and we are doing the same thing again. From the date object we are getting the hours and padding if required with 0, and then we are doing it for minutes and then seconds, and that array we are again joining with hyphen. So this function, if we return the formatted date, whenever we're going to pass a date object here, this is going to make sure that this is formatted and giving us a timestamp. So we have set the timestamp as the file name, and we have created the a tag. Now all we have to do is simulate a click event by adding a.click, and that is going to automatically start the download. Now we're also going to set up the on start and on stop. So for that we're going to write media recorder current on start, and this is going to be a similar function with event object being passed, and we're just going to set the is recording to be true, and similarly for on stop, we're going to say set recording as false. Now with the media recorder setup, we are ready to set up the manual recording. To set up the manual recording, we are going to have to fill up user prompt record function. So I'm going to command click on this. Here we have already written the logic, but I'm going to add another check for the webcam. So I'm going to say if webcam ref.current, if it doesn't exist, then I'm going to show a toast to the user that camera is not found, please refresh. Else we're going to say if media recorder ref and current state is in recording state, then I'm going to do all this. So first, before we stop the recording, we are going to have to request the data, and when we do the request data, our on data available function is going to be called, and from there it is going to save the blob onto the downloads folder. So at this place, we just have to call the request data function, and that is going to trigger this on data available handler, and that is going to make sure that it gets stored inside the downloads folder. We'll say media recorder current request data, and then we'll be stopping the recorder, and then we're going to give it a toast that recording saved to downloads. I'm going to write else when recorder is not in recording state, then we're going to have to start the recording, and I'm going to set a timer of 30 seconds whenever a recording starts, so that the user does not accidentally leave the recording open and it takes up a lot of browser memory. For that, I'm going to create another function, start recording, and I'm going to define the function here. We are going to check if webcam ref current exists and media recorder ref current and state is not equal to recording. We write it again, although we are calling it from here. As you can see, we have already checked it here, because the start recording method will be called from different places. For example, when this will be automatically triggered by the person detection, then also we want to make sure that whenever we are calling in this method, at least we are checking that the media recorder state is not already in the recording state when we are talking about starting the recording. Inside that, I'm going to write media recorder ref dot start, and then we're going to set a timeout of 30 seconds in which we will be basically stopping the recording. So for that, I'm going to check if media recorder is in state recording, then we'll stop the recording. So the same thing, we're going to request the data first, then we're going to say media recorder ref current dot stop. Now one thing to note here, there are two ways this video recorder can stop. One is by this timeout, another is when the user prompts it. Whenever the video is already recording, if the user clicks on this button again, it is going to stop the recorder. But the timeout is going to still run even if the user has clicked the button to stop the recording. Whenever the user clicks the button to stop recording, we're going to make sure that the timeout also gets cleared. For that, we are going to save this timer in a variable, and I'm going to call it stop timeout. And I'm going to define this variable up on top, let stop timeout, and the type is going to be any, and I'm going to initialize it with the value of null. And when the user clicks the button to stop the recording, right before that, we're going to clear the timeout. This is going to make sure that whenever the user specifically stops the recording, the timer is not running on the web API, or if the callback is pushed to the task queue, that callback of stopping the recording does not get executed on the V8 stack. Now with that, our manual recording is implemented. If we refresh our page and click on this button, we see that it does start recording, and then if you click on it again, it saves it in our downloads folder, and we'll be able to see the video. Now we'll have to hook it up with the automatic recording whenever the person is detected, and that's going to be very simple. So inside the run prediction function, whenever we got the predictions, we're going to check if a person was one of those predictions. So we're going to say if predictions.length is greater than 0, then we're going to loop over the predictions for each, and we're going to check if the prediction.class is equal to person. Actually on top, we're going to define a variable as isPerson, which is of type boolean, and we're going to initialize it with a value of false. And whenever a person is detected, we're going to say it is true, and we're going to write it in the same line. So whenever this is true, isPerson is true, and in that specific case, after the for each is done, we're going to call if isPerson, then start recording, and that should automatically start recording whenever a person is detected. So let's test that. I'm going to hit refresh on our page, and it automatically starts recording because it detects me. So if we stop this, so I've used a sticky note to cover the webcam, and as soon as I'm going to remove this, this is going to detect me as a person, and it is going to start recording. So as you can see, it detected me as a person and it started recording. and after 30 seconds it is going to automatically stop the recording and going to save it on the downloads folder. I also have the option to click on this button and stop the recording at this point. Now, whenever auto recording starts, I'm going to call the beep function that we wrote to make sure a notification sound is played. For that, I'm going to modify our start recording function a little bit. What we're going to do is that when the user manually starts the recording, I'm not going to play any notification sound because the user himself or herself is doing it. But when he starts recording on detection, I'm going to make sure that the notification is played. For that, in the start recording function, I'm going to accept a boolean parameter called, I'm going to name it do beep, and this is going to be of type boolean. And when the recording starts on user prompt, I'm going to say it is false. And when the recording starts on detection, I'm going to say it is true. And inside this start recording function, right after the media recorder starts recording, I'm going to say if it is to beep, then play the beep sound, and it is going to get the volume as parameter. So let's test that. I'm going to refresh my web page and I'm going to remove the sticky note, and it does give me a notification sound and video recording starts. So even if you stop, as long as you're on the screen, it is going to keep recording. So I'm going to stop the webcam and stop the recording, and then it will not automatically start recording. Now, to enable or disable auto recording, whenever a person is detected, we're also going to check if auto recording is enabled. Then only we're going to go ahead and start the recording. So the way JavaScript timer functions like set timeout or set interval works is that they are provided via something called web API that is provided by the browser, and that is separate from the V8 stack, which is the stack queue that executes the functions, including the callback functions. So the timer function that is provided by web API runs the timer on a backend thread, and whenever that timer or the interval is ready, it puts the callback function. In our case, that callback function is run predictions. That callback function gets put onto the task queue, and the event loop from the task queue puts it on the V8 stack where it gets executed. Since this auto record enabled state gets changed, that information is not passed on to the run prediction function, which is either on the task queue or waiting to be put onto the task queue by the timer function that is running on the web API. So every time any state variable gets changed, we'll have to use the use effect hook to make sure that the earlier interval gets cleared and a new interval gets created. And this time the callback function will be aware of this changed state. So whenever a state variable changes, we'll have to make sure that we run this exercise, that we clear the interval that we previously set, and we set a new interval. So that is what we are going to do now. We already did that for mirrored state. We'll have to put auto record enabled also in this list. So now auto record enabled is disabled. So that is why it is not starting the recording. Even if it detects me, I'm going to enable it and it automatically starts recording. And as long as I have it on, it is going to keep recording as long as I'm on the screen. If I stop it, then I'll be able to stop the recording. Now with that, all the functionalities of our page is complete. Now I'm going to make this wiki section a little bit more interesting, and I'm going to add a few buttons here. So right after this horizontal flip, I'm going to show this button. For take pictures, I'm going to show this button, and so on. So I'm just going to copy the buttons that we already used, and that is the reason we defined this as inner component. All the state variables will automatically be available to this component. So we'll be able to use the state of those buttons as well. So I'm going to copy those buttons here. So first is the flip horizontal. I'm going to paste it here. Now obviously this is much bigger. So I'm going to make it a little smaller by giving it a class name, height of 6, width of 6, and a top and bottom margin of 2. And the icon is also going to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to give it a size of 14, and that's going to look much better. I'm going to do that same thing for the camera button. I realized that I pulled some additional code here, and we'll have our camera button. Now we're going to do the same thing for the video, and for this I'm just going to copy and paste it. And do the same thing for the auto record button. And for this, the ring size has to also reduce. I'm going to set it as 30. And that way we'll be able to get that small nice animation there as well. And all these buttons are clickable. And for the theme section, I'm going to add the icons themselves rather than a mode toggle button. So I'm going to copy some code here. So here, rather than adding the mode toggle button itself, I'm just going to show both those icons sun icon and moon icon, and I'm going to have to import them. So I'm going to click on it and then command dot and update import from Lucid React, and going to do the same thing for the moon icon. These buttons are not clickable as we don't have any on click, but it's just going to show this as a button and then slash and then again this as a button with the text that you can change the theme of the page. So it is going to look like this, and these buttons are clickable. I just realized that I haven't implemented the capturing of the image. This is going to be very simple because the React webcam library that I'm going to use, that already has a image capture function, which we'll use to capture the image from the webcam ref. And we're not going to have to use any other additional API that we used for recording video. So we're going to go to the user prompt screenshot method. Here I'm going to write if webcam ref and current does not exist, then I'm going to show a toast that camera not found, please refresh. Else I'm going to go ahead and take a picture. So I'm going to say const image source. So I'm going to write webcam ref .current .get screenshot. Now if we console log this image source, this actually comes as a base64 image. So let's do that. If we right click on this page and go to inspect and open up console, you'll see that the image comes as a base64 image data. So we'll have to convert this base64 data into a blob object. I found a function that does it very clean way. I'm going to copy that function here, and that is again going to be a standalone function. I'm going to define it right at the end of the component. So here this takes the base64, then creates byte character, and then finally gives us the blob. I'm going to use this function here after the get screenshot. I'm going to say const blob is equal to, we're going to call that function, pass it the image source, and from that blob we are going to again get the URL using the create object URL function, and then we're going to create a tag, assign the href with the URL that we created, and then set the download property with the file name. For that we're going to use the same thing that we did before, same function, format date. We're going to pass a new date that is going to give us the current timestamp, and extension is going to be PNG, and finally we're going to simulate a click event. Now if we click on this button, it is going to take screenshots and download it onto our downloads folder, and we can see the image there. And finally at the bottom we're going to show our social handles. Actually I'm going to create it as a external component. So right in this components folder, I'm going to create a new file called sociallinks.tsx, and I'm going to copy and paste some code here. This does have dependencies, and I'm going to use GitHub, YouTube and LinkedIn social handles, and it uses font awesome libraries corresponding icons. So we're going to bring up the terminal window by hitting Command J, and then Control C will stop the service, and then Command K will clear the terminal window, and then we'll write npm install font awesome / react font awesome, and we're going to do the same thing for this as well, and that is going to resolve those libraries. And finally we're going to import this as a component. Right after this share your thoughts section, we're going to get social media links, and it gets automatically imported. And if we run it now, refresh our page, and our social links will be available. That means our page is complete. We can make it dark or light. We can change the orientation. We can click a picture. We can record a video, or we can set up auto recording or disable it. And we also get to change the volume. And now we are going to go ahead and deploy this onto Vercel. And for this, we'll have to create a repository on the GitHub and then link Vercel with that GitHub repository. From there, Vercel is going to take it and then build it and create the website for us. So we're going to do that. We're going to hit Control C to stop the service, and Command K will clear the terminal window. We already have Git initialized in our project directory when we created using the npx create npx app @latest command. If that is not the case, you can always write git init, and it is going to reinitialize the project directory as a Git repository. Now we'll go to GitHub. So after you sign into GitHub, you'll have to click on this button, create new, and then new repository. And I'm going to name it Watchtower AI, and I'm going to keep everything as it is, and then hit create repository. And this is going to give us the commands. We already initialized Git on our repository. I'm not going to create a readme file, rather I'm going to commit, give it a message. So before that, I am going to check Git status. So as you can see, we have all these files here that are not added into the staging area. I'll do that. I'll write git add dot, so it gets added to the staging area, and then I'm going to run again git status. So it's all green now. So now we are ready to commit to our local repository. So you're going to write git commit -m, so that with a message, our first commit, and hit enter. And that commits it onto our local repository. Now to push it to GitHub, we're going to have to first add the remote origin. So if we run git status, it will say work tree is clean. I'm going to add the remote origin now and check if we are on the main branch. So I'm going to say git branch. We are indeed on the main branch. So we are ready to push, and we're going to write this line. And this is going to push our local repository onto GitHub. Now after that is done, if we come here and refresh, we'll be able to see our project onto GitHub. Now the next step is to connect this with Vercel, and that way Vercel will automatically take this up and rebuild in case of any changes and deploy this code as a Next.js application. Now we'll go to Vercel and click on login. You might want to log in using GitHub, and as you see, I already have many projects created. You will get add new button here, and you can click project. And since I already have my GitHub connected, it is automatically fetching all the GitHub public repositories that I have. You will not be able to see it like this if it is for the first time you are deploying on Vercel. You'll have to click on add GitHub account, and in this pop-up you will have to first log in using GitHub, and then you'll have to allow Vercel to access your public repositories. I already have it set up. After that, you will be able to see your list of GitHub repositories here. This is the repository that we just pushed, and we're going to click on import. And you can give it a name here. I've already created a project with the name Watchtower AI, so I'm just going to write 2. We don't need any environment variables, but in case you build a project that you want to build onto Vercel and your Next.js project is using environment variables, then you can specify them here. I'm just going to click on deploy, and it fetches from the GitHub repository and then start building it. Well, as you can see, there is a warning here. It says use effect is using run prediction. So let me show you what that is in the code. So when we are calling this run prediction within this use effect hook, ESLint expects us to put this run prediction as a dependency. You can add this, and that way that warning will go away, but I don't think that is absolutely necessary here. So our app is live. Let me click on this, and you'll see first it is asking for camera, and as you can see, the URL is Watchtower AI 2 Vercel app, and that is publicly shareable. I'm going to allow camera, and it's going to fetch the model first, so that is going to take some time. So after that is done, our app is live, and you can share this link with anyone and they'll be able to use it publicly.